Hello, my name's Lora Harris. I'm an associate professor at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory. I'm also a member of the Faculty Senate. A really warm thank you to the Chancellor for your opening remarks. President Goodwin, on behalf of the faculty, I thank you for your remarks and welcome your leadership of UMCES. As we get to know you and the style of your presidency, a few brief thoughts. During this year of transition, you have traveled around the state to our laboratories and campuses, listened deeply and authentically, and welcomed new voices. As a systems ecologist, I observe that you have a healthy respect for the principles of Alfred Lotka, a scientist who worked nearly a century ago to apply thermodynamic laws to living systems. I'm going to paraphrase here, but one of his principles was that systems self-organize to maximize production. This self-organization is a bottom-up design process where individuals interact in ways that often evidence complex behaviors that by definition are at the edge of chaos. The feature that has us so fascinated in self-organized systems is that they often also exhibit emergent properties that are unexpected and transformative. The sum is greater than its parts. Don't we all want to be part of a system where the sum is greater than its parts? In other words, you have confidence in us and our agency, and we look forward to your support and guidance in translating that agency into excellence and integrity, as we are working to do today with the strategic plan. Finally, you have a deep commitment to the goals of inclusion and diversity, as evidenced by today's agenda and the conversations, plans, and meetings over the past year. So my formal job right now is to introduce our speaker, and I just want to introduce you all to this topic, as President Goodwin mentioned briefly in his remarks. Periodically, the National Science Foundation releases new statistics on gender and minority representation in science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM fields. Last spring, an analysis of these data by Bernard and Cooper Dock, published in Nature, highlighted the lack of progress for underrepresented groups in the geosciences, a STEM field many UMCES scientists can identify with. For women, there have been modest gains, from 14 to 20% representation in the faculty. However, of all the STEM fields, the geosciences have the lowest proportion of PhDs awarded to ethnic or racial minorities. The difficulty in reckoning with these data is that there have been ongoing efforts to increase recruitment to the geosciences. For example, ASLO's multicultural program. In considering these parallel realities, work on the student pipeline, and a failure to translate into gains in representation in the faculty, we're at a moment when some serious self-evaluation is warranted. The good news is that organizations like the NSF are investing in a significant way to change these patterns. For example, through the Includes Geo-IUS programs and the GOLD program I am a part of. I am also heartened that our discussions to date at UMCES regarding inclusion and diversity have included an acknowledgement of the responsibility we have for the lack of representation in our field. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Renetta Tull. Dr. Tull is going to jumpstart this conversation, and then we'll have a panel afterwards with some wonderful internal and external speakers. But I'd like to take a moment to introduce Dr. Tull because it's really special that she's able to join us here today. Dr. Tull serves at the University System of Maryland as the Director of the Graduate and Professional Pipeline and Special Assistant to Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. At the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, she serves as Associate Vice Provost for Strategic Initiatives and Professor of the Practice in the College of Information and IT. Dr. Tull is also the founding director of Promise, Maryland's Alliance for Graduate Education in the Professorate. She presents across the US and Puerto Rico on topics ranging from graduate school recruitment, retention, and dissertation completion to faculty development. So we're going to hear a lot of great stuff today. I want to especially recognize the awards she's received recently for her mentoring work. In 2018, she received the Global Student Forum Mentoring Award presented at the 2018 World Engineering Education Forum. Dr. Tull earned the BS in Electrical Engineering from Howard University and both the MS in electrical engineering and the PhD in speech science from the Northwestern University. Recently, she was a speaker on women in STEM at the United Nations headquarters. Very cool. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tull and giving her your full attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harris, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd also like to acknowledge President Goodwin. President Goodwin, congratulations on your leadership, and it's a great honor to be here. Chancellor Corrett just had to leave a few minutes ago, but I wanted to acknowledge him, and also friends from the governor's office, our colleagues and guests who are here in the room, as well as those who are online. And I'd like to thank Lynn Wren also for inviting me and for helping me with our logistics. So I'm going to be talking about overcoming challenges of inclusivity and diversity in STEM, and sort of as Dr. Harris said in her introduction, just trying to jumpstart this conversation about diversity. And just to give you some context, I am going to be really talking about this from the context of faculty diversity, because that's where I live and that's where I see a lot of the issues happening. I work with pipeline professional development, so with community colleges, with the Ellis AMP program, which is another National Science Foundation program, Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. You heard about the Promise, AGEP, and we recently got a new grant from the National Science Foundation that includes 5 of the universities in the system: UMB, UMBC, University of Maryland, College Park, Towson University, Salisbury University, in this effort to really increase faculty diversity from postdocs and into faculty. And so one of the things that I wanted to mention is that we have an entire world to consider. I've had a chance to see glaciers melting in Alaska. I was in South Africa this summer where there was a drought, and even in some of the public spaces, we could not use some of the water, so there was a lot of Purell around, during that time. But we have an entire world to consider, and so in light of recent climate change reports, we really don't have the luxury to be elitist or classist or any other kind of ist, because we need people from all backgrounds and all walks of life. We have to fully train and develop the next generation of scientists. And these are scientists who are not only going to be your mentees, but your colleagues, and eventually your successors, the people who are going to replace you. We need as many good hands and brains as possible. And so you've heard a little bit about some of the numbers. And because I do a lot of work with the National Science Foundation, I've had a chance to look at least a few of them in some of the fields. And if we're thinking about faculty diversity, the question, of course, is where are the faculty coming from? And we have to look at our graduate student population to see if we even have graduate students in the pipeline. So if we look to see in some of the earth and atmospheric and ocean sciences, who's enrolled, we have less than 9% of people who are from what we consider to be historically underrepresented backgrounds. And I'm using the National Science Foundation's definition for that. And so those groups include people of African American descent, Hispanic, Latino, Native American, Alaska Native, Pacific Islanders, I think I said Hispanic already, African American. So those groups are considered to be historically underrepresented in the STEM fields. The enrollment is low in Earth, atmospheric, ocean sciences, less than 9%. What about doctoral recipients? The doctoral recipients in environmental science, less than 9%. In fishing, fisheries, science and management, less than 9%. Forestry, forest management, less than 9%. Natural resources and environmental policy, less than 9%. And natural resources conservation, wildlife range management, again, Less than 9%. I was invited to go to the World Wildlife Fund's headquarters and have a talk with them, even about diversity. And so as a result of that discussion, many of them came to one of the conferences that we had this summer called the Summer Success Institute, where I was able to at least put them in front of a group of about 200 graduate students who were from underrepresented groups, just to get the word out, just to say that these kinds of fields are fields that are open and available and who want you to be part of their career ranks. By the way, one of the hashtags that I have is Think Big Diversity, so it is sort of apropos that it leads into President Goodwin's Think Big concept. I really believe that faculty are the multipliers. So when we think about the faculty are going to be those who are going to teach the teachers. They are going to influence the next generation of those to come. And there are some ways that when I'm thinking about faculty diversity, I'm thinking about how to really push this forward. Now, my husband and I wrote an equation many years ago because we were trying to think about how we could really start to conceptualize a lot of different kinds of concepts. We were thinking about momentum of success, and all of these different variables have different things. This is generally offered to students. It was published in Optics and Photonics News, but it has different kinds of variables such as teaching, and F for focus, and M for mentoring, and R for resources, and all of these different things. And when I was trying to think about how to sort of conceptualize sort of overcoming obstacles in terms of diversity, I didn't have time to come up with a whole new equation. And so I thought, well, what if I just sort of went back to the ABCs, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, how can I sort of conceptualize this? And so in the next couple of slides, you're going to see at least some different words that I was thinking about that I think help to conceptualize things that we can start to think about when we think about diversity and inclusion. And it's going to seem quite elementary, but if nothing else, hopefully it will help us to reaffirm our commitment, to sort of review and rethink the way that we're even thinking about these words in the concept and in the context of diversity. So starting with A. Basics, acceptance. Are we accepting people from all backgrounds into our fields? Openly, seeing them, seeing people from all walks of life and all backgrounds and saying, I am accepting of people from who don't look like me or who might look like me being in my field, so that we can be a collective of people from all backgrounds. There's affirmation in there as well, so I didn't get a chance to put that in there, but also affirming them once they have been accepted. And how about belonging? Of course, people need to feel like they belong. Now, there's some science and some social science. Sarensen did some work back in the 70s. McMillan and Chavis did some work in community psychology where they talked about this sense of belonging. In social science, they call it the psychological sense of community. That's one of the theories. And they talk about this idea of making sure that people feel that they have membership, shared emotional connection, that they have influence, and that they have fulfillment of their needs. That's all part of a sense of belonging. Our own commitment. Are we committed, and do we remain committed to the success of people, both academically, but also as people? Of course, being dedicated. This is not always an easy road, but we have to be as dedicated to bringing people into the field as we are to our science. Egalitarian. Dr. Carrie-Ann O'Meara is one of the researchers at the University of Maryland, College Park. She's in the College of Ed, but she does a lot on STEM education research. And one of her recent papers, along with Dr. Kimberly Griffin and some other researchers, talked about the Promise program that we run and disrupting rural relations. That was part of the title, Disrupting Rural Relations. And she talked about how she observed that there were were these egalitarian ways that people were thinking, where faculty, administrators, even presidents and provosts would be in a room with students and have these conversations in a way where the hierarchy was not emphasized, but where people felt like they were on more equal footing to have conversations, to relate, and to connect, and how that is necessary in certain contexts and at certain times in order to promote conversations. Fairness across the board. There are a lot of ways that this can go, but something really small and interesting. And this happens a lot when we have our research groups and so forth. Are all of the students being treated fairly? Are they all getting a fair shake? Are they getting fair opportunities? There have been situations in the past where there have been some students who have been sort of relegated to the side, who have been told, no, you don't need to go to that conference. No, you don't need to go to that special speakers forum. Or no, you don't need to be involved in this opportunity to write a grant or this opportunity to write a publication, or well, I'll acknowledge some of my students on the website, but not all. And so having something that's fair across the board makes a big difference. And for students who are from underrepresented groups, this means a lot, because a lot of times people from underrepresented groups who are coming into these higher education spaces don't necessarily want to be treated differently. They want to be treated fairly. They want to be treated like all of the other students. And if there is some kind of discrepancy, it is felt much more deeply. Greatness. There's some research on STEM identification. Carlone and Johnson did some work where they looked at how students see themselves as scientists. But the other part of that is how people in higher positions, higher in the hierarchy, whether they're faculty, they're lab leaders, they're PIs, et cetera, how they in turn see those students and then recognize them as scientists. So it's important to see scientists, see the students as the great scientists that they are and could be in advance. Happiness seems, really something that we don't talk about that much in science, but it doesn't make sense for your lab to have poor morale, right? The entire lab should have good morale. They should be able to work well. There has to be an encouragement of self-care, etc. Having an opportunity for new ideas. Ideas can come from all kinds of places and all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of experiences, and valuing those ideas coming from different people is important. One of the things that I would do in my group is on certain times of the year, we have sort of a free-for-all of ideas, and then we talk about how maybe we can take one of each person's ideas and see how we can implement that for the next phase of our research or for the next piece that we're going to do. And that way, everyone has an opportunity to feel valued. Justice. Understanding and not sort of turning a blind eye to things related to social justice. There are things that are happening in the world and in the lives of people who are from underrepresented groups. Black Lives Matter is a real issue. Puerto Rico and the Hurricane Maria, and what's happening there still, where they still don't have all the resources available, is a very real issue. People who don't have clean water in certain places, still a real issue. And so we can't be blind to issues of social justice. Knowledge, providing an opportunity for everyone to learn. Limitless, not putting limits on your students. And I'm moving kind of quickly because I am running out of time. Mentoring, something, of course, we know that we all have to pay attention to. Making sure that you're doing things that are going to help your students to feel that they are noteworthy, and opposing oppression. So we're right in Baltimore, and many of you may remember the whole issue about Freddie Gray as an example, right? And so even as scientists, sometimes people will say, well, that's not something that I have my hands on. I don't really get involved with that. But sometimes there are things that you can at least, or we can at least recognize that some of our students may have some connections to that, or they may need to get involved just for the sake of connecting to their community. There was a professor in biology at UMBC who I think very astutely told his students, I don't fully understand, but I understand that you have a need to go down to protest. And so I value that, and I will give you the opportunity to do that. Let's talk about how we can make up the work. So little things like that do indeed mean a lot. My program is called Promise, so of course seeing the promise in everyone, making sure that your students are qualified. Sometimes we seem to say, well, our students need to be qualified in advance, and of course there are admission standards and so forth, but we also need to work ourselves to make sure that our students are qualified. That's part of our job as faculty, as mentors, etc. Resilience, helping to build resilience in our students, seeing their success, their talent, understanding different situations. I'll give an example. There was a student who was from a Native American community who said, I just wish my faculty understood that when we have a death in the family, that it's not just a fly on the plane and in one day you go to a funeral and that's it. That there are days of rituals and days of different kinds of things that we have to go through. And as part of my tribe, I can't separate from that. And so I just wish somebody understood that. So promoting understanding is important. Making sure that each person feels valued and that each person feels worthy. And I don't have time to go into the rest of the alphabet, so I will end with this piece. The UN talks about the Sustainable Development Goals. So you've already heard about the grand challenges. Well, one of the things that we talk about a lot in the work that I do with my colleagues at UNESCO, whether I'm in China or in South America or in Dubai or other places, we talk about these Sustainable Development Goals that the UN has, and many of you may have seen this already. But in environmental science, of course, thinking about number 15 and number 14, but also not forgetting that gender equality is also part of the whole equation, thinking about quality education for all. And I hope that some of the things that we mentioned, these very simple ABCs, along with these Sustainable Development Goals, will give us an opportunity to have even broader conversations about diversity, about inclusion, about how all of us have some kind of role, even if whether we're a peripheral mentor or a direct mentor or a PI or providing funding or encouraging a student to succeed, encouraging students or even family to take part in organizations, all of that is important. When I was little, I used to play in the dirt. I used to look up at the sky. I had questions. And my family didn't have the kind of answers that perhaps our future students who are scientists will have. And now that I'm an engineer, I make sure that every student in my family, every child has a science kit. We do chemistry things on, during holidays and all of those kinds of things. Imagine how that could proliferate on the environmental sciences side when we have more people who are involved in this endeavor. And on that note, I think that my time is up, and then we have to go into the next panel. But thank you so much for your time and for your attention, and all the best in the rest of the summit.
That was a wonderful way to begin our panel. I'm just going to make sure our panelists are making their way up to sit with us here as I make their introductions. So we have about half an hour for some discussion on these issues, and that discussion is going to be led by 3 panelists from both within UMCES and outside. And so I'll begin by introducing Dr. Paulinus Chigbu. Dr. Chigbu is a professor at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore in Marine Environmental Science, and he's also director of NOAA's Living Marine Resource Cooperative Center, which is a wonderful pipeline for underrepresented students. So we're really grateful that Dr. Chigbu could join us with his external perspective. From within UMCES, we have Zoraida Perez-Delgado, who's a graduate student working on her master's degree with Dr. Hallie Kilborn at the Chesapeake Biological Lab. I've known Zoraida a long time. We'll hear a little bit more about that later, perhaps. And it's also, I just want to sing her praises a little bit by mentioning that she will be a Knaus Fellow beginning in February. She took a very ambitious position with Craig McLean in NOAA, so good luck to Zoraida. And finally, Dr. Fredrika Moser, who's director of the Maryland Sea Grant Program and has a long history on promoting diversity and inclusion issues, both through our own REU program and through Centro Tortuga that I work on with Fredrika. So the way we're going to organize this is each of the panelists will be able to give 3 to 4 minutes of an introductory remarks. And then we're going to try to turn it over to a back and forth discussion that I'll moderate. So my job is to help keep everyone on time, and Dave Namazi is also going to be helping with that for the panelists. So with that, Dr. Chigbu, would you like to begin?
Sure. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to serve on this panel. As Lora mentioned previously, a recent article in Nature Geoscience, in that article, it was stated that over the past 40 years, the percentage of geoscience degrees that are awarded to underrepresented minorities has remained very low. And I would like to say that perhaps without some collaborative programs that have been established, that percentage would be much lower. Examples of such collaborative programs are the cooperative science centers that National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration established in 2001. And there are 4 centers: the NOAA Center for Atmospheric Science and Meteorology, the NOAA Center for Coastal and Marine Ecosystems, the NOAA Center for Earth System Science and Remote Sensing Technologies, and the NOAA Living Marine Resources Cooperative Science Center at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. These centers have similar structure, similar components, and goals, in the sense that the lead institutions are minority-serving institutions, and each of the centers has 5 to 7 partners, including research-intensive universities and primarily undergraduate institutions. Although these are research centers, the primary goal of the centers is to recruit and train undergraduate and graduate students, especially those belonging to underrepresented minority groups in geosciences. And there is emphasis on capacity building, especially at the minority-serving institutions, and also in leveraging resources from the partner institutions. So what are some of the impacts of the Living Marine Resources Center at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore? With funds from NOAA, we have been able to build capacity. We've recruited a number of faculty members in various areas of marine science. We have enhanced infrastructure. For example, we have purchased some research boats that we use for doing research in the bays and in our rivers. We have also been able to leverage funds to establish new programs to support the Living Marine Resources Center. And with capacity that has been built, we now have recruited a lot more students than we would have recruited without funding from NOAA. And we now pay them more competitive stipend. So we've raised the stipend that we provide to students. We have also leveraged funds from National Science Foundation to establish an REU site in marine science, and also to establish a summer bridge program. I want to mention that one of the partner institutions of the Living Marine Resources Center is actually UMCES, particularly IMET. And that as a result of the Living Marine Resources Center, we have contributed in enhancing the diversity of students in the MEES program. And in fact, most of the students in the MEES program who belong to underrepresented minority groups are enrolled at UMES, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and at UMCES, IMET. And so there are some elements of the Living Human Resources Center that can be adopted to further enhance diversity of the student body in the MEES. I think, yes, the success of the program at IMET, of course, is because of the excellent faculty you have here who mentor the students and help them, not only undergraduate students, but also graduate students. And also, Living Human Resources Center has a project director, Rose Jagus, who is here, who has devoted a lot of time to actively recruit students from center institutions and from minority-serving institutions within Maryland. In addition to the fact that she runs her summer program, internship program, through which she recruits students into the graduate program. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Zoraida, why don't you go ahead? I've got a thank you.
Well, my name is Zoraida. Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Is it better now? I think I have to hold it. Oh, okay, that is better. Well, I am a minority. I am Puerto Rican. And I'm not just Puerto Rican that I have Puerto Rican blood, but I grew up in the States. I grew up in Puerto Rico. In fact, all of my family is still back on the island. I did my undergraduate degree in a small private university in Puerto Rico and had the opportunity to work in numerous research experiences throughout summers, including working with the Tortuga program with Dr. Lora Harris here in Fredrika. It wasn't until 2016 where I moved to the continental US to pursue my graduate studies here at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory with Dr. Hallie Kilborn. And you can imagine my surprise coming from a very small, diverse island to the continental US, where I realized I was the only Latina in my campus. It was shocking, to say the least. It wasn't bad. I've had 2.5 years. I've had great moments. I've learned more than I could have ever imagined I could have learned. And it has been an amazing 2 years, but it has also been very challenging as well. Not only on the scientific side, but the cultural side as well. Being the only Latina student in my campus can be isolating at times, and it can be a bit of a stressful situation. And that is why I'm here today on this panel, to kind of give light to some of the problems that you can face as a Latina in sciences, in graduate school, and come up with ideas and just talk about ways to increase diversity and inclusion and strategies to improve recruitment of diversity and minorities into sciences and into UMCES. Right now, I am the president of the American Association of University Women chapter at the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory. And one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to start up this kind of subcommittee, working hopefully with the faculty to improve diversity within CBL and maybe reach out to the other campuses within UMCES so that they can improve them as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoraida. Fredrika, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Laura. I first want to say thanks very much to Peter Goodwin. He has really set a tone at UMCES to be striving towards inclusion and diversity. As Chancellor Corrett noted and Dr. Tull both noted, we've been failing in this field for a very long time, and there are a lot of barriers and reasons that have happened, but I think it takes leadership to make some changes, and it also takes bottom-up action from all of us. So it's really, for me, an honor to be up here. Paulinus and Zoraida are amazing, and they're the experts, not me. I'm not exactly sure why the white old lady is up here, but we'll go with that. I think my understanding and background in this issue of the paucity of diversity in the geosciences was really brought home to me as an issue we could tackle when the AAAS and the National Academies spoke out about this incredible lack of diversity that we had in the sciences, and that it was a threat to the American leadership in science. It left out opportunities for creativity and innovation, and that if we didn't bring all the people to the table and let them participate, we were not going to maintain the leadership in science that we have now. And I think that is important, and we should all, as scientists in the room, take that deeply to heart. So as Maryland Sea Grant, there's sort of three things that we've sort of been involved in. Two have been working with undergraduate students, including Zoraida here. And then one is through the Sea Grant Association. And so quickly, I want to thank, we've been running a NSF-funded research experience for undergraduate programs at the Horn Point Laboratory and the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory since 1989. About 15 years ago, with a lot of encouragement and support from NSF, we made a concerted effort to change the cohort makeup. We had been strong in recruiting women, but not students of color. So we've made a real concerted effort in that. I really want to thank Mike Allen, who runs that program now, for making that more diverse. We thought it was important to include a cohort of students that were from diverse backgrounds so that they could have strength together. The second program we have has been also funded by the National Science Foundation, Centro Tortuga. It's focused in Puerto Rico, and Lora Harris and Jamie Pearson are part of the leadership from UMCES that work with our scientists faculty there, and we bring in early stage undergraduate Hispanic students and indoctrinate them in doing marine science from the day they walk in the door. It's an academic and summer year-round program. And then finally, I'm extremely honored to be part of the Sea Grant Association and to work so closely with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who together have done a visioning exercise over the last year in diversity and inclusion. And so the Sea Grant Network is 33 different university systems in the United States. I think that with our commitment to increasing diversity and inclusion in the marine sciences, we will begin to have a broad voice across the nation in marine science, and I look forward to working on that. Thank you.
So I'm still having issue getting this mic to work, but I really want to make sure we open it up to discussions from the floor. We have about half of our time left. So can I just solicit some questions from those of you about, we're hoping to use this to jumpstart recommendations and ideas and creativity. We've heard about faculty diversity from Dr. Tull, a lot on student recruitment. Ideas from the floor or questions for the panelists? Larry. Oh, there's a mic coming in. They are bringing you a mic, which is good, because this one's...
Thank you. I'm Larry Sanford. One of the things that puzzles me, difficulties I see for UMCES, is that we are spread across 4 different labs, and that the issue that Zoraida raised about being the only underrepresented minority, Latina, at CBL is a harder one because we're so spread out. I wonder if anybody has thoughts on how can we promote inclusion and sort of cultural cohesiveness within a system of labs that is so spread out geographically.
Zoraida, do you want to?
Yes, I can talk on that. I was actually talking about that last night with my family when I told them I was going to be participating in this panel. One idea that I have on how to be more inclusive would be to just have some sort of cultural nights or cultural experiences. Maybe one of the labs can host a cultural night, and we have such a diverse faculty. We can just have students from the other campuses come here and just interact and talk about their cultures. We used to do something similar back in Puerto Rico in my undergraduate institution. We would have one night of the year where every faculty member, be it Puerto Rican or Colombian, would just have like a small booth and just have food about their country. And it's just a simple, casual way of interacting. And maybe we can do that and move it around campuses every year. We meet once a year for the colloquium. Why can't we do something similar for cultural and diversity?
Anything else from Paulinus or Fredrika?
Well, within the Livermore Resources Cooperative Science Center, and bearing in mind that it is a center with 7 institutions, we have what we call cohort workshop in spring. And so we have students from IMET who actually participate in that cohort workshop and interact with students from other campuses. And so that helps to create a community of scholars within a larger community of scholars.
I think just a commitment to being welcoming, like plan on it, like bring people together, share food, share ideas, share cultures, but open the door.
And if our goal is true representation, I would hope that in the next 10 to 20 years, you wouldn't be the only. Another question.
I'm struggling with how do we get more students into the pipeline earlier. I think that what we're working at the graduate level, Paulinus has an institution with undergraduates. I also see a need to go earlier, and I guess if the panel has ideas on how do we let students know that there's a future for them in this field when they're making those first decisions as to what to study in school. How do we let them envision themselves here when they're, say, in middle school?
Fredrika, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we've been working a lot on the pipeline, and I think, Eric, it's making the effort to go to the institutions where you want to be recruiting students from and building relationships. Early on, when I had just started at Sea Grant, I worked closely with Dr. Ben Suker at Hampton University and the ASLO Multicultural Program. And the most important lesson I learned from there is that if you don't go and make personal connections, no one is going to trust you with their students, right? So think about that. How do you go about how do you find your graduate students? I would bet that most people find their graduate students by talking to their colleagues who have undergraduates they think will make promising graduate students, and they're willing to send them to you because they know you and they trust you. If you can't have that door open across the spectrum of possible students, you're not going to increase the pipeline. That would be one of my discussion points, or to pay attention to.
Paulinus, do you have anything?
Well, within the Livermore Resources Center, we have programs that target students at various levels. Take, for example, at Savannah State University, which is a center institution, Dion Hoskins runs a coast camp, and she's been running that for the past 8 to 10 years to expose students at that level, at elementary level, to the ocean science.
And I'll just interject on behalf of Jamie and I that our experience in Puerto Rico is that we had to do some convincing at NSF, but it is remarkable what you can do with first-year undergraduates if you get them in a field setting and get them hands-on with the research. And our experience is that catching them at that first year is critical for where they're going to major and whether they're going to choose us. So, any other questions?
And also, at UMES, our RAU site targets freshmen and sophomores.
Laura, over there.
I'm Rose Jagus. Paulinus mentioned that I'm the co-PI for the LMR CSC here at IMET. And I think we've done a reasonable job at recruiting undergraduates and graduate students from underrepresented minorities. But that's just the beginning of the pipeline. And we have to think about mechanisms and funding opportunities for going further up the pipeline with that, with postdoctoral associates and with faculty. So I think that's something we all need to think about. And any suggestions people have will be very welcome.
Is that a response, Bill?
Well, I also think that we need to look down because we need to get into science fairs in high schools and schools like that. And that's where we're really going to make the difference, is to get into those science fairs where the kids are in high school or below. And that's where, before we get them into undergraduate, they've got to start thinking about what can I do as an adult. So wherever the faculty can get involved in science fairs, I think is really, really helpful to start this pipeline, because the pipeline doesn't start as a freshman. The pipeline starts as middle schoolers or high schoolers.
So if I can just revisit Rose's comment, because I think that that's very timely and speaks to what Dr. Tull mentioned, and certainly what we find in the data from that paper from last spring, where we have this mismatch in so much of our efforts being focused on early recruitment and not seeing that translated into a diverse faculty. Paulinus, would you mind making an initial comment, and maybe I'll add one after you, to how can we diversify our faculty?
Well, what I want to say is that most of the graduate students belonging to underrepresented minorities at IMED are actually entirely or partially funded by the Living Man Resources Center. So if we have additional funding, I'm sure Rose will be able to recruit more students into the graduate program. And if we have postdoctoral opportunities, then that will make it easier for them to transition into faculty positions.
And I'll just mention, I'm a PI in the National Science Foundation's Geosciences Opportunities for Leadership and Diversity, which is really applying a lot of social science to help understand what the barriers are to diversifying the faculty. So for example, there's one group called Field that I think Cindy Palinkas participated in, one of their field camps, which is looking at how the field camp experience itself is a barrier that is full of implicit bias issues that serves to really diminish the interest in the field of geosciences. And my own work is focused on using community-based research as a vehicle for generating interest in the field of geosciences. So it is a hard nut, and there is investment in that. Dr. Tull, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Sort of interjecting from the back, just a brief comment, just an example of how we saw this happen in engineering, and I think it gets to your question as well as Dr. Jagis's question. One of the things that we saw in engineering is that the National Society of Black Engineers, as an example, started to promote faculty diversity as part of their grant structure. And they started to get grants to help to promote a diverse faculty. As they had more diverse faculty, of course you have more diverse faculty who are PIs. They're then bringing their colleagues along. They are connecting with other communities and so forth, and building these larger alliances and coalitions that then go back and get grants to go back into the middle schools and into the elementary schools, and sort of working along all the way through the pipeline. I'm not saying that they've solved it, but I'm saying that that has helped to work on both sides, and then they've gotten more students involved to also go back and be mentors at multiple levels.
Thank you. I'm afraid that we're out of time at this point, but I just want to, again, thank our panelists. I know we have lots of other resources in the room. The president for Coppin State University is here, and I would have liked to hear more from her, so I'm eager to continue the conversation. And thank you again to Fredrika, Zoraida, Paulinus, and Dr. Tull.